We are tonight's entertainment.
You can't handle the truth.
The fire rises.
Pizza time.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So it begins.
You know how much I sacrificed?
You think that's air you're breathing?
Groovy.
I don't have friends. I got family.
We are sex people! 1, 2, 3, 4!
Craft Services.
Hi, Parth.
Hey, Trent.
You're looking well.
You're looking well as well.
What have you been eating?
Thanks for asking, Trent. I recently got my Costco credit card. I've got a my own Costco membership, not of my parents, my own. And I got the Costco credit card because, you get some 5% cash back on certain items. As you enter adulthood, you start getting interested in things that seemed totally uninteresting to you as a child, like credit cards.
And Costco.
And Costco
Costco
memberships.
as a kid was always cool, but as you get older, it gets cooler for different, more money-based reasons.
Yes. And so while I was at Costco, I obviously had some free samples. Actually, I only had one, and it was kind of disgusting. It was a chocolate cereal, but it was sort of like health-based, I guess, but I didn't realize that it was health-based.
That's why it was disgusting.
Until I had it, and I was like, I bit into it, and I was like, oh, this will be like candy. Like, in the way that like some cereals, it's like, this is totally just horrible for you, but it tastes good. And then I bit down into it, and it was like, have you ever had crisps for like babies?
No.
Okay, the only reason I have is because I was 6 when my younger brother was born. So, but it tasted kind of like that. And I was like, what the fuck? And I wanted to throw it out, but felt sort of bad about wasting food. So then I was like, it's not so horrible, and it's not like giving me like an allergic reaction or something.
That's
where
nice, yeah.
It's, hurting me to eat it. So I guess I'll finish it. So I did. What about you, Trent?
I have a few questions about you and Costco first. Number one, how much was the Costco membership?
I believe the Costco membership, the one I got, which is the lowest tier, is $60. But it sort of pays for itself in that you can go to, especially when you get the Costco credit card. Costco memberships is like what like A-list is, but for adults. Where once you get one, you're like, well, this is why you should get one. It's such a good value.
You're right. My parents talk about their Costco cards with the enthusiasm that we talk about A-list.
Yes.
And I feel like, do you get gas there also? Because the gas is like notably cheaper.
I did not, but like I only got my card like a few days ago. So.
And did you get it for personal grocery shopping?
Well, I mean, this is sort of insider baseball, but like my good friend Sophia and I are looking to move out soon, as friends. It was kind of something where it's like, you're slowly like, when am I going to have to pay for my own phone bill? And it's like, I'm still not, and I'm happy not to right now. But those kinds of things, you're starting to like eat those costs because you're like, I'm 24. There's certain things I should probably
start to try to chip away at. Like, is my dad going to pay for my Spotify forever? At this rate, it kind of seems like it, but...
Well, Spotify I've paid for, but I ain't never paying for a streaming service,
I'm not ready for that conversation as someone who currently is enjoying the benefits of most of the streaming services.
Yes.
What did I have? You just saw me house a few pretzels.
That's
and
true.
I bit my lip. But I guess the more interesting part of that story is I have to go to the office for work, and they have a really good snack spread, and there's usually not that many people around, and so I found a cardboard box and filled it up with
wow.
Because I always used to do that, but now that I have to pay for my own groceries and sustain myself financially and calorically, it means a lot more. So
yes,
it took 4 oatmeals, a few naked juices, and that pack of pretzels.
Do you drink naked?
No, it's the smoothie. I am podcasting without wearing pants, though, just to reveal. The Parth didn't even know that.
I did not. That's a reveal to me.
But the beauty of working on a show where only your top half is presented. And to you, the viewer, nothing at all. So I could be naked, and only Parth would know. And maybe that would just make the dynamic a bit spicier.
But what's also spicy is our intro.
Welcome back to Craft Services, where we talk about the movies. Each week we talk about a film and hopefully have a crew member of that film where they talk with us about their experience working on the picture. This week we have returning guest. Bow, 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 bow.
Editor Eddie Hamilton. Oscar-nominated editor Eddie Hamilton.
That's our boy.
That is our boy.
So we interviewed him before he got nominated.
Before he got nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah,
One could say before we interviewed him, he wasn't Oscar nominated, and after we interviewed him, he was.
Now look at him. Yes, not a cause and effect, just an observation.
Yes. But yeah, we got to talk again with Eddie about Mission Impossible 8, which was super exciting.
The Final Reckoning.
We wanted to get him for 7, but the scheduling just couldn't work out, which we sort of get into because of how hard he was at work on both of these movies, and the schedule seems pretty unforgiving.
Yes, Parth, if you wind back the clock, it's almost exactly 3 years ago we released our first interview with Eddie Hamilton on Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, you were telling me that you were listening to that, and I asked if we sounded stupid, and you said that we didn't. We didn't sound too stupid. Our audio quality.
I specifically said, Parth, don't sell yourself short. I said you sounded good. I said the audio quality is mid, and I stumble over my words even more than I do now. But you were fine, and have always been pretty fine. And by fine, I mean handsome. Attractive. But thank you to Eddie Hamilton for coming back. Your, what did we say, coaster set is in the mail.
Yeah, the returning guest coaster set, that's given to every guest that returns, is on the way. Yeah, but I don't want to keep the listener from it for too long because I think it's a really cool interview.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's just do it and cue it.
Let's cue the interview. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our interview with returning guest Eddie Hamilton. He's the editor behind such films as Kick-Ass, Top Gun Maverick, and the past 4 Mission Impossible films, including our film for today, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, guys, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on. Great to talk to you.
So we got to talk with you for Top Gun Maverick, and so just moving forward to Mission Impossible: Final Reckoning, this movie had sort of a really long production schedule and overlapped with Dead Reckoning. Yes. And I was sort of wondering, just to start off, if you could lay out what the actual timeline of you working on this movie was.
Good question. So we started filming the biplane sequence for The Final Reckoning in February 2022. So almost 2.5 years ago. More than that, nearly 3 years ago, I guess, right? The reason was for weather and availability of crew and permission and locations and all kinds of things. But we sort of took a break from filming Dead Reckoning to go out and do the biplane sequence. And so we did 3 months, February, March, April. Then we took a break. Then we filmed all of the stuff with Mount Weather with Angela Bassett playing the president over the summer. Then we filmed a bit more of Dead Reckoning, and then we went back to South Africa at the end of 2022 in November and December to get to finish the sequence, basically, and do the stuff of the team driving up to the entrance. I'm trying to think of the name. The Congo Yoa, that's right, the Congo Yoa Doomsday Vault. And then we kind of worked on as much as we could, parked it. The other movie came out in 2023, and then in 2023 in the autumn was the strikes, and we were editing a bit during the strike. So I did all the Mount Weather stuff and we did the biplane stuff. The interesting thing about the biplane is that I was there in South Africa for the whole of production, and I was staying with Tom Cruise and Chris McQuarrie in a rented house, and we would have breakfast together every morning, discussing what they were going to do during the day. We would travel to set, discussing what we're doing during the day, and then I would be in every briefing, and then as they were flying the planes, I would look back through the previous day's dailies and start breaking that down. And then on the way home we would travel back, and then we would have dinner together, and they would always be discussing what they'd got that day and the things that worked and the things that we could do better. It took me about 4 months to assemble the first version of that scene. It was probably I'm going to say about 25 minutes. It's about 15 minutes now. So we cut quite a bit out. And the 25-minute version was every single piece of action that we filmed, knowing that there would be some tightening and also some duplication. And, I'd be lifting out chunks of action in the fullness of time. But it was very ambitious. I mean, there was 400 hours of footage-ish for the biplane sequence, which is 15 minutes in the film. A lot of that is the cameras rolling to test the camera rigs. So they would always fly the plane with the cameras rolling to check that the rigs would stay intact and would be able to withstand the G-forces of whichever stunt they were doing. And we did about 4,000 flights, so in the red and the yellow plane. So it was very ambitious and very time-consuming indeed. And when you send Tom up, you're usually only getting a few seconds of action for each flight. So that was 2022. And then 23 was, we were filming and then editing during the strikes. And then in 2024, we just worked throughout on Final Reckoning. I didn't have any time off at all. I had the occasional weekend off during 2024, had 2 weeks off at Christmas. And then from 2025, we were still filming the odd pickup here and there. We'd finished the majority of the photography. And I had about 3 days off between Christmas and when the movie came out. So there was a lot of 7-day weeks earlier this year. And I was very tired indeed. And it was an extremely intense schedule to get the film out on time. And we could have done with another 2 months, to be honest. I wish we had another 2 months because I think we would have been able to pick up maybe one more scene and maybe compress the film a bit more. But it's the very, very best version of the movie that we could have made in the time that we had, basically. And when you accept the job of working on a big studio movie like this, you are taking on the responsibility of delivering the film on schedule for the release date, which is so important. Every HOD in post is focused solely on making sure the film is ready for the release date. That is, one of the things you cannot miss. There's so many dominoes that need to fall for the movie to get out there in the world, all the foreign language dubbing and the subtitling and, the multiple versions, the Dolby, the 4DX, the Screen X, the IMAX, all that. And everybody is standing by ready to make all that stuff happen the moment you finish. So it's important that you hit the deadlines and get everything ready.
Just as we talk about Top Gun Maverick and the biplane sequence in this movie, did your extensive plane editing coming off of that inform this extensive sequence at all?
Yeah, it's really, for me, it's about learning the best way to break the footage down into manageable chunks of action so you're not overwhelmed with it. I would take maybe a minute of action and break it down into 10-second chunks. So I would have one timeline, which would be each minute of the biplane sequence or each mini beat of story. And then I would make a timeline. I would label it and make, because obviously they shot everything out of order. So every time I would get footage, I'd be like, which piece of the story is this? So I had these master selects roles where I'd put everything that was remotely usable for a sequence on a timeline in 10-second chunks. And I use a subcap on the Avid Media Composer to label it. So I remember what it is when I come back to it later. So I honestly think that the experience from Top Gun and from Fallout, from the helicopter sequence, where there was, again, a huge amount of footage, 80 hours or something for that sequence. It's just learning the strategies to deal with that amount of footage, be able to log it all, find it later, mark it all up so that you remember how you felt when you were watching the footage, so you can always find the best bits again later. Being able to refine the sequence quickly when the director wants to see options, when there's so much to go through. The hardest thing in the biplane was something which is incredibly short now, but it was aside from how to intercut it with the rest of the action in the third act of the movie, which we tried so many ways to before we landed on the version that you see now. There was a scene which was Gabriel chases Ethan into the clouds and then Ethan banks away and hides from him. And originally there was a lot more cat and mouse. It was a little bit like the, Mutara and Nebula battle in Star Trek 2, where they were kind of floating around in the clouds and they couldn't see each other. And they shot so much footage for that. Stunning footage. And I originally built a version that was quite long, and then we compressed it and we compressed it and we compressed it. And now it's like 11 seconds in the movie or something like that. It was one of those scenes where, and I had a feeling that that would be the case when I saw all the footage coming in. I was like, I think in a long, complicated movie like this, we're going to be wanting to get through this quite quickly and get to the point where Gabriel flies at Ethan and like knocks his wing so that the strut is damaged. But when, 3 years earlier when we were filming, you have your spidey sense to go on as an editor about what you think will end up in the movie and not, but you don't know. And quite often you're wrong. Your initial instincts are wrong. But in that case, I think my initial instincts were right, and I just couldn't see a version of the film sustaining even 2 minutes of them doing cat and mouse in the clouds when everything else is going on with the team and the president in Mount Weather. But you only really discover that as the movie comes together and you start to confront the realities of how long it is and what has to go and the compromises that you make for the benefit of the movie as a whole. Yeah.
Speaking on how sort of complex everything you have to put together is, I know that you and Christopher McQuarrie have revealed that like the movie originally had a non-chronological structure and that
Correct.
the first 45 minutes were like the most like headbanging stuff for you guys to have to put together. Can you, how long was it in that non-chronological structure, and like when did you realize?
To be honest, that we tried it. It was scripted in a non-linear version in a way to create mystery, or what we hoped would be mystery in the audience, where Ethan would bite down on the cyanide tooth. Then we would cut to credits, which is not what happens in the movie now. And then we would come out of credits to Ethan walking down the London street, looking very distraught, covered in dust, holding the key up and getting arrested by Briggs and taken to Mount Weather. And we thought that the audience would be curious about what had happened. Oh, did he escape? Why is he covered in dust? Did someone die? What happened? And sometimes that works in films where you pose a question and the audience is patient enough to wait for the answer until later in the movie. But in this case, people found it confusing. And it was not adding to their sense of mystery. It was just adding to their sense of confusion, which is not what you want the audience to feel. And I think we only tested one version like that. And it became clear that, the audience was going to reject that. So we had to look at it in a more linear way, but it's still not quite linear now. There are still little pieces which kind of jump around in time, but it's pretty linear. And it ended up, being this kind of long amount of vegetables for the audience to eat in the first 45 minutes. We're setting up a lot of the stakes from the previous movie and from Mission 3 and from Mission 4. And, we're recapping a lot of stories. We're explaining about the Sevastopol. We're explaining about the entity, the Rabbit's Foot and Owen Davian and Julia. And, there was so much to recap. Some of that we could have taken out, and I think it would have been a shame because some of the Mission fans out there are kind of keen to discover what the Rabbit's Foot was, and McHugh wanted to kind of shut the door on that, make it feel like Ethan was responsible for the entity in some way, and so he feels, like he's got a lot of stakes in succeeding. Aside from the greater good, he wants to fix the mistakes that he made in the past. Originally, we had the scene where Luther's defusing the bomb and Ethan's talking to him. That used to come much later in the film. As Ethan had left the submarine and got the bends and was drowning, we would cut to Ethan running in to see Luther, and they would have their farewell speech, their farewell dialogue scene, all the lines from Ving where he says, this is what I was born to do, and what are we going to, are we going to retire, go fishing, all that stuff where you feel the emotion and the connection between these friends and the sacrifice that Luther is making. And in some ways it was helpful because it kept Luther alive as a character until later in the film. It reminded you that Gabriel had the poison pill, and it kind of gave Ethan an additional motivation to kind of crush Gabriel later, in the biplane scene. But again, people found it too much of a departure and a left turn at that point in the film. And they were kind of bumped off the ride, quite frankly. So we ended up, we tried to move that later just to have 3 minutes later in the movie, but it didn't work. So it ended up going back into the linear order for the greater good of the film. So there is a lot of vegetables and there's a lot of setup and a lot of callbacks. And we tried to do it as briskly and as elegantly as we could. I wish it was shorter, and we tried so many ways to do it. But in the end, what you see is the very best version of the movie that it could have been. It started out over 4 hours long, this film. So I managed to cut an hour and a half out of it to get it down to the length that you see now. So we did all right. But, it would have been harder to, if you cut too much out of the film, then there's no emotion and no stakes, and you don't give a toss about anything that happens. So you have to invest the audience to a certain extent in order for them to understand the stakes of what's going on and, the emotional context of every sequence. We could have cut the scene with Ethan and Briggs in the jet, and just had him get arrested, and then they land at Mount Weather in the helicopter. And then you don't have the story about Briggs being Phelps' son, and the handshake at the end wouldn't have worked. And Briggs becomes a nothing character in the film. He doesn't have any agency. And we did a version without and a version with. And ultimately, the best thing to do for the movie was to leave that scene in there, even though at that point you're like, can we get on with it? Because there's been quite a lot of dialogue and tragedy, and it's a very intensely emotional scene, and Ethan is dealing with the death of his friend. And anyway, in the end it was in, and McHugh really liked it. It's one of his favorite scenes in the film. McHugh meaning Chris McQuarrie, the director. We call him McHugh because there's too many Chris's on set. And yeah, so that's the journey that you go on as an editor. We spent a lot of time trying many, 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 many different ways over weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of editing, and understanding that this was a real challenge for us and for the audience. But we did the best version we could, and I think that for a lot of people, when they get to the end of the movie and they see the biplane and they've been through the submarine, and then they have that great emotional resolution in Trafalgar Square, where Benji's all right and Ethan is thanking his team, and the world appears to be kind of returning to normal. I think everyone has had a big warm hug, and they kind of forget the fact that the beginning of the movie was quite long. Hopefully that's the impression we got from our test screenings anyway.
Talking about the vegetables in the first 45 minutes and the seemingly million different ways you tried to go about it, was there a way that included 0 clips from prior films?
Well, yeah, I guess so. The thing is that we had to start the film with this graphical representation of the entity and the voices explaining what the entity was doing, which are all from the previous movie, apart from a couple of lines of Benji from Mission 3. And if we didn't have that, the problem was when people start talking about the entity, you didn't have a concept of what it was. So we needed to put that right up front. And then we go to the mission brief, and information is the death of emotion. And the mission brief is always pure information. But McHugh said, wouldn't it be interesting if if we had a female voice do the mission brief, which is the first time that's happened in the franchise history. It's never been a female voice. And it's never been it's never been like a friend to friend communication, which it is here. Sloane saying to Ethan, help me out here and come in and thank you for your service, which has never been said. But because of that, we were able to do our kind of trip down memory lane, greatest hits montage from the other missions, which I think is, honestly, if you're watching the last film in a franchise, it's kind of a nice way to start the movie and to remind people of the epic stuff that Ethan Hunt has done and his relationship with his friends and the different women in his life and the villains that he's encountered and things like that. As a fan of these movies, I would want to see something like that in this film, as a little reminder of what you love about these films and all the commitment that Tom has made over the years to, great practical action sequences. And then we get into the mission brief, which again used to be a lot longer. We trimmed it down. But I think if you hadn't had that little trip down memory lane, it just wouldn't have been as emotional, for example. Then the other problem is in the scene with Gabriel in the torture chamber, when we're flashing back to the Sevastopol, we're flashing back to the Rabbit's Foot and Mission 3 and Julia being kidnapped and all that stuff, you don't want to ask the audience to leave this movie to remember another movie. You have to show them. And there are a large percentage of people who may not have seen any of them. And certainly in our test screenings, that was the case. So you need to serve it up. You need to say, this is what happened, to make it easily digestible, or as easy as possible for the audience to digest, given that, there's quite a lot of flashbacks. But I hope that we worked on it enough that it feels smooth and elegant and relatively straightforward to follow. We work so carefully on those sequences, myself and McHugh, over weeks and months, to make sure that everything flows effortlessly and all the dialogue earns its place, and we strip out a lot of dialogue as well. We could have done a version without shots from the other movies, but I don't think it would have been as successful in terms of a viewing experience, I would say.
Whoa, Trent.
Whoa. Parth, how does it feel that Eddie Hamilton is a part of my my dream team?
Well, what Trent is referencing, if you didn't listen to our
5-year anniversary episode.
5-year anniversary, we drafted past guests as though they were to crew on a movie we directed, and it was Trent's turn. I had sort of incensed him by
drafting production designer Ruth DeYoung.
Yes, another favorite guest who we got to talk to for Oppenheimer, and nope.
Coaster set in the mail.
Yeah, in the mail. It's in the mail. Shopify will send it over soon. But Trent sort of just took Eddie Hamilton as the editor, knowing that Mission means a great deal to me. Top Gun means a great deal to me. And feels fine. I got Ruth DeYoung. So, all is well.
But Eddie Hamilton, the fact that Parth and I are fighting over you,
it should really be
in our dream draft, really says everything you need to know. So thanks so much for coming back.
Yeah, thank you so much to him. Thanks so much to the Paramount PR team for helping set everything up. It was super, super smooth. Yeah, I had a really good time talking with them. So good, in fact, that this is not the end. There's more.
There's another mission. Or, more realistically, this final mission is being divided into multiple parts.
Yes. And we're still trying to figure out whether this is a 2-part or a 3-parter, because there's just so much goodness we don't know. We don't know what the right course of action is here. Figuring that out is hopefully not a mission impossible.
No, I think it's a mission probable.
I think it's a mission not that difficult, but I had to throw it in somewhere.
Not that pressing of a matter.
Yeah. But again, thanks so much to Eddie Hamilton. It was super cool. I think it was 11 p.m. his time when we were talking with him. He gave us some really awesome bits of info.
Yes, he seems like he's been, from what we've learned talking to editors, it seems like those people edit just pretty much fucking 18 hours a day. I don't know how they fucking do it.
Yes. It takes a very specific kind of person that's very organized and, What we're saying is, you were nominated for an Oscar for a reason, Eddie.
And we're endlessly impressed and thankful. In addition to the coaster set, we've thrown in a pint glass set just to show how thankful we are and to say congrats on the movie release. And congrats on the final mission. You made it.
Yeah. But what would make me real thankful is if the audience...
Yeah, we need something from them.
Not only went to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher, etc., wherever you get your podcasts. Not only do we want you to listen to these interviews, we want you to rate them. We want you to give them a review.
5 stars.
Write a little something.
At the lowest, 4 stars.
Yeah, well, we were sort of pissed at people that gave 4-star reviews, but now we're just sort of happy to...
Now we'll take it.
We'll take it.
I thought today about Pandora, and I was like, what a simpler time when people would flip on a Pandora station, right? When that was the best you could get musically, when before you could stream music.
Yeah. And everything's just sort of fucked now in this internet ecosystem. But speaking
Yes.
of which, we also are on Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah, speaking of more things that are fucked, Instagram, Twitter. I don't know much about their owners, but they're probably pretty cool. and,
No, they're
like,
probably cool. They're probably cool. Nothing in the news that's concerning right now. Anyways, thanks so much, guys, for listening, and we'll see you next week, hopefully.
Yes.